I've always found solace in the mountains. The vast, indifferent wilderness of the Appalachians has been my sanctuary, a place where the demons of my past couldn't follow. Or so I thought. My name is Jake Miller. I'm 29 years old, and I've been hiking these West Virginia trails since I was old enough to lace up a pair of boots. It's in my blood, passed down from my father and his father before him. They taught me how to read the land, how to survive when civilization was nothing more than a distant memory. But they never taught me about the things that lurk in the deepest, darkest parts of these ancient hills, the things that hunger. It was supposed to be a routine trip, a week-long trek to a remote lake high up in the mountains, a place I had been planning to visit for years. My best friend Mike was meant to come with me, but life had other plans. An emergency at work left me facing the trail alone. I should have postponed, should have waited until Mike could join me. But the mountains were calling, and I had to answer. The first 2 days were uneventful. I made good time, my boots eating up the miles of unmarked trail as I navigated by map and compass. The familiar weight of my pack was comforting, filled with everything I'd need to survive out here. It was on the third night that things began to change. I'd made camp a few hours shy of the ridge, pitching my tent in a small clearing and getting a fire going as the last light faded from the sky. The flames cast dancing shadows on the surrounding trees as I heated up my dinner, the rich smell of rehydrated beef stew filling the air. It was around 8 when I retired to my tent, leaving the fire burning low. I planned to read for a bit before turning in for the night. The only sounds were the gentle crackling of the flames and the soft rustle of pages as I flipped through my well-worn copy of The Stand. Then I heard it. A sharp snap like a dry branch breaking under sudden weight. It came from just behind my tent, no more than a few feet away. I froze, my heart suddenly hammering in my chest. Black bear, I told myself, has to be. They're common enough in these parts, and the smell of my dinner might have drawn one in. But as I strained my ears, listening for any further movement, I was met with only silence. No shuffling, no snuffling, nothing to indicate a large animal moving through the underbrush. Swallowing hard, I unzipped the tent and crawled out, flashlight in hand. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing but trees and shadows. "Hey," I shouted, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Get out of here." My voice echoed through the trees, but there was no response, no startled animal crashing away through the forest, just that eerie, unnatural silence. I circled the campsite, scanning the tree line, but found nothing out of place. No tracks, no disturbed undergrowth, nothing to explain that sound that had been so clear, so close. Sleep didn't come easy that night. The next morning I broke camp early, eager to put some distance between myself and whatever had visited in the night. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was just my imagination running wild in the isolation of the backcountry. But as I hiked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig, sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. More than once, I caught myself whirling around, certain I'd seen movement out of the corner of my eye. But there was never anything there. I reached the lake just before sunset, the golden light painting the still water in breathtaking hues of orange and red. Under different circumstances, I would have been awestruck by the beauty, but all I felt was relief at having reached my destination. I set up camp quickly, choosing a spot on the tree line with a clear view of the lake. As darkness fell, I built up the fire, taking comfort in its warm glow. That's when I started hearing the footsteps. They were soft at first, barely audible over the crackling of the flames. But as the night wore on, they grew louder, more distinct. Always just out of sight, circling my camp with deliberate, unhurried steps. I told myself it was just an animal. A deer, maybe, or even a bear. But deep down I knew better. The rhythm was too regular, too purposeful. Whatever was out there in the darkness was walking on two legs. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. "I know you're out there. Show yourself." The footsteps stopped. For a long moment there was nothing but silence. Then from the depths of the forest came a sound that turned my blood to ice. It was a laugh high and cold and utterly inhuman. I scrambled into my tent, zipping it shut as if the thin fabric could offer any real protection. My hands shook as I fumbled for my flashlight, casting its beam wildly around the small space. That's when I saw it. A shadow, human-shaped but wrong somehow, too tall and too thin, projected against the side of the tent. It stood motionless, looming over me. I must have passed out from sheer terror, because the next thing I knew it was morning. Pale sunlight filtered through the tent walls and birds were singing in the trees as if nothing had happened. For a moment, I almost believed it had all been a nightmare. Then I unzipped the tent and stepped outside. Footprints surrounded my campsite. Hundreds of them, circling my tent over and over. But they weren't human prints. They were too large, too misshapen, with long, curved claws gouging the earth. I broke camp in record time, not even bothering to eat breakfast before I started the long trek back to civilization. As I hiked, I began to notice things missing from my pack. Small items at first: a pocket knife, some trail mix, a spare lighter. Things I might have misplaced or used without remembering. But as the day wore on, larger items began to disappear. My map, my first aid kit, even my spare clothes. It was as if they were vanishing into thin air, because I never once took off my pack or left it unattended. I pushed myself to the limit, hiking well into the night. I couldn't bear the thought of spending another night in these godforsaken woods. My legs ached, my lungs burned, but terror kept me moving. It was nearing dawn when I finally broke through the tree line and saw my car parked at the trailhead. I've never been so happy to see a hunk of metal in my life. As I fumbled with my keys, a movement in the rearview mirror caught my eye. I turned, my heart in my throat, to see a figure standing at the edge of the forest. It was tall, impossibly tall, its limbs too long and jointed in all the wrong places. Its face, if you could call it that, was a twisted mass of shadows, with only 2 pinpricks of cold, blue light where eyes should be. It raised one grotesquely elongated arm in a mockery of a wave, and I heard that high, cold laugh echo through the trees once more. I don't remember the drive home. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in my living room, still in my hiking clothes, staring at nothing. I've tried to convince myself that it wasn't real, that it was all just a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and isolation. But I know the truth. Something followed me out of those mountains. I can feel it watching me, even now, waiting. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear footsteps circling my house.